Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz. Brandis Friedman has the evening off. On the show tonight, Chicago Public Schools announces plans to lift its mask mandate, but the teachers union is pushing back.
This is the most difficult election I've ever been involved in.
It's candidate filing day, why politicians say this election season is different and tougher than usual.
The indictment accuses Madigan of leading, for nearly a decade, a criminal enterprise.
And as former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan is indicted, we speak with a longtime political reporter on his timely new book. But first, some of today's top stories. It's official, masking in Chicago Public Schools is set to become optional. Starting next Monday, all CPS schools will drop the mask mandate, citing the city's low number of COVID cases and the change in CDC recommendations. Meanwhile, the Chicago Teachers Union says it will file an unfair labor practice charge. We'll have much more on this story in a moment with District CEO Pedro Martinez and Chicago Public Health Commissioner Dr. Allison Arwady. A big day for the facility once known as Mercy Hospital on the city's south side. The Bronzeville Hospital is once again receiving ambulances. The hospital was bought in April and is now known as Insight Hospital and Medical Center. The Illinois Department of Public Health authorized Insight to accept Chicago Fire Department ambulances after a year of being bypassed.
Very excited to once again open our doors, welcome Chicago's first responders, care for patients brought by ambulances to our critical care emergency department, and provide the best of care.
Could the Ricketts family expand their sports empire from baseball to soccer? The Cubs owners are reportedly looking into making a bid for the Chelsea Football Club. The English Premier League team won't come cheap, though. Roman Abramovich, a Russian oligarch who owns the club, is reportedly asking for nearly $4 billion. He was expected to face sanctions from the British government after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. There are also up to 10 possible suitors interested in buying the team. The Ricketts family unsuccessfully explored buying an Italian soccer team back in 2018. And up next, more on Chicago Public Schools' decision to go mask optional, so please stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
As we mentioned earlier, Chicago Public Schools says it will lift its mask mandate next week. The district announced the move to a mask optional model today, citing a significant decrease in COVID metrics, improved COVID testing in schools, and a rise in vaccinations in the district. But the Chicago Teachers Union is pushing back, saying the decision violates a safety agreement made in January. And joining us to discuss the decision are Dr. Allison Arwady, Commissioner of the Chicago Department of Public Health, and Pedro Martinez, the CEO of Chicago Public Schools. Welcome both of you back to Chicago Tonight. Pedro Martinez, I'll start with you. Why this decision to make masks optional starting next week?
Well, Paris, it's been almost 2 years since the pandemic started hitting our schools, and this is the first time in those 2 years that I've seen at the national level with the CDC, at the state level with IDPH, and at the local level with our local Department of Health, where all three are saying we're now in a low-risk environment. So after consulting with medical professionals, with Dr. Arwady, we decided that it is time now for our district to go mask optional. We were one of the first districts that went universal masking, and we're one of the last districts that's now going mask optional. And I think I'm just encouraged by where we're at with the safety conditions.
Dr. Arwady, despite this, WBEZ analysis found that nearly 3/4 of all public schools had a less than half, a 50% vaccination rate. Some schools on the south and west sides, vaccination rates are in the teens and 20s. So why a one-size-fits-all mask policy given the variance here?
Yeah, so no doubt that we need to continue working on vaccination, but at the district level, 56% of CPS students have had at least that first dose. 49% are fully vaccinated. Those are the kinds of numbers that we look at when we make decisions at a district. And look, we're going to continue to encourage, if folks are not vaccinated, that they can choose to continue masking. But the bottom line is we are in a good place here in Chicago. And when we're in a good place from a COVID perspective in the community, it also means we're in a good place in the schools, where we know that the risk is actually lower than it is in the surrounding community because of all the other mitigations that are in place.
And as you both know, the Chicago Teachers Union is not happy with this decision. In a statement released today, the Teachers Union pushed back, saying, quote, "The decision by Mayor Lori Lightfoot and her Chicago Public Schools team to unilaterally remove the mask mandate starting March 14th is a clear violation of our January 12th Memorandum of Agreement." Pedro Martinez, is this a violation of that agreement?
Well, Paris, we've been talking to our CTU partners really over the last couple of weeks as we were seeing both the safety, both the measures getting better and just telling us that it's much more safer. And one of the things I also want to clarify is Dr. Awadi said, we're still going to continue to encourage masking, especially in communities that have many children that are unvaccinated. And so I feel confident that we're going to continue to talk to our partners. We'll come to some agreement. But I do feel I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we're now safe, and we just have to continue to double down on vaccination efforts in some of our neighborhoods so that we stay safe.
And Pedro Martinez, you mentioned you talked to some folks in the CTU. Did you talk to Jesse Sharkey? Did they seem to be on board with this announcement, or did they push back?
Well, we've been talking to not only Jesse, but, the team in general. My team has also been talking. And so we were just having conversations about how do we make sure that first of all, we might have some staff that might have some health conditions, some of our children. How do we make sure we protect them? How do we make sure we continue to encourage masking in environments where we know that there's still some risk? And so those are the discussions we've been having. And again, we're going to continue to have those conversations. I just believe right now, we've always said we're going to listen to the science. I'm going to listen to our medical experts, including Dr. Awadi. And I think, like I said, I'm hopeful that, this is the safest that I've seen our community be.
Dr. Arwady, what about teachers and students that have medical vulnerabilities? Should there be a mask policy, maybe a different option for a mask mandate for certain classrooms?
Yeah, so as you know, CPS has made available not just masks, but the best quality masks out there for kids and adults who choose to continue to wear them to protect themselves. And I want to be clear that it's not like masks are going to vanish overnight. Masks will continue to be required, for example, after students or staff have been home for 5 days of isolation or quarantine. To come back, they'll have to continue wearing them in days 6 through 10. If we have any concerns for spread or we're investigating, a potential cluster, we will be asking and really even requiring in those limited settings some masking. But the good news is, by every metric, old CDC metrics, new CDC metrics, every measure that you count here, we're at 0.8% positivity as a city, and CPS's screening positivity is at 0.14%. That is absolutely a place where the risks remain low. We need folks to stay out. If they're having symptoms, we need to keep the testing up. We're not done with COVID, but we are at a point where we can lift this requirement for everybody while continuing where people choose to continue to wear that, especially if they're unvaccinated. I want to be really clear that that is absolutely not only acceptable, but it's encouraged.
And Pedro Martinez, the union, as we mentioned, in their agreement said that the masks should remain up until August. They're going to file an unfair labor practice charge. Your response to that?
Well, like I said, Paris, we've said that we're committed to safety and we're committed to following the science. And right now, when you look at, where we're at with our positivity rate, how low our cases are, the fact that we're doing more COVID testing than ever before, our safety procedures have never been stronger. And here's what I believe, Paris: the majority of our schools, because when I go visit classrooms, we never see any challenges with masking. I think the majority of our children are still going to wear masks. And we're actually going to be providing lesson plans to our teachers to just have those conversations with children so that, we're very accepting whether a child's wearing a mask or not. And we also want to make sure parents understand the risks. So if you're not vaccinated, they just have to know the risks if they're not masking. So I believe, most of our schools will continue to mask. We're going to double down on vaccination efforts with our mobile, with mobile events. The Dr. Awadi has an amazing program where they actually go to your home to get vaccinated. So my message to our families, please get vaccinated. Let's keep our community safe.
You know, that labor agreement, Pedro Martinez, came after 5 days where teachers and administrators had walked off the job. Can you provide assurance for parents here that a work stoppage like that is not going to happen again?
I'm going to be an optimist, Paris, that I think the majority of our staff, are also feeling good about where our city is at and where our district is at. Because the data is very clear and our keys are very clear. We're very transparent. And so, again, we're going to continue to work with our CTU partners. We'll continue to, wherever there's anxiety, as Dr. Awadi said, we will have masks in every single school. We'll have them available through the end of the year, KN95 masks for both children and staff. So I think we can work through this, and I'm looking forward to it.
And Pedro, as you know, there's a lawsuit brought by a downstate Republican who's now running for a political office. A judge is set to hear this case very soon. Is this decision influenced by that case?
Well, the first driver for us always is safety and where the health metrics are at and what our medical professionals are saying. But I will tell you, Paris, we wanted to make sure we also retained our ability to pivot if this pandemic changes, because we've seen it change multiple times. And so it was very important for us to continue to keep our authority. So that did weigh into the decision, but the priority still will always be safety and where the health metrics are at.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, and we thank you both for joining us. Our thanks to Dr. Allison Arwady and Pedro Martinez. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
And on a programming note, a member of the Chicago Teachers Union leadership will join us tomorrow night. In a typical year, Illinois would be deep in the throes of campaign season right about now. The primary would be taking place next week. Instead, election season is just getting underway. It's the first day candidates were able to file to run in what's now a June primary. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more. Amanda.
Yeah, Paris, it was cold and snowy in Illinois' capital city today, but no matter. A whole bunch of folks, scores really, spent hours outside in a line in an otherwise nondescript strip mall where the Illinois State Board of Elections is based. It's similar to how folks used to camp out to buy concert tickets. Remember that before that could be done online? Showing my age here. Now, these weren't just random anybody's. Some were prominent politicians. Others are aspiring to be.
That's democracy in action. It's a special day, and I'm excited to be here, and, this is how the sausage is made.
I'm glad to be here. This is another phase in the process, an important phase in the process, is getting your name on the ballot. And it all starts with these petitions. I've been very honored to have people across the state of Illinois help me circulate my petition.
We've had a great response from the voters at the doors. They're responding to our message very well, and you're going to see that when we file our petitions for our caucus today. So we're excited about campaign season 2022.
Forming that long queue is partly a custom, a way to maybe get some media attention, but also a chance for a leg up because anyone in line to file petitions by the time election authorities opened their doors this morning had a chance to be listed first for their race on the ballot, a position that could make a difference if there's a close contest. In order to make it on the ballot, Illinois candidates have to collect signatures from registered voters. Now, the amount varies depending on the race, but for statewide candidates, thousands of signatures are required. Some candidates filing for local office here in Cook County sounded less than enthused.
This was the most difficult election I've ever been involved in. First of all, this is Chicago. This is winter. There's a pandemic. They squeezed us. Usually we have 90 days. We only had 60 days to get petitions. People didn't answer their doors. Love ring cameras, they don't work for us.
This is probably the most challenging petition drive that we've ever had, in large part because of the weather and the shortened time period and the pandemic. Everything you can think of made it more challenging.
Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle has done this routine before. She's running for a fourth term of the office she's held since 2010. But Preckwinkle is also chair of the Cook County Democratic Party, so she has responsibilities to ensure that petitions for other candidates slated by the party are also in order. Preckwinkle did not mention another reason that voters may not be keen to sign petitions, that they might be fed up, disgusted with politics, particularly in light of Wednesday's indictment of former Illinois House Speaker and former Democratic State Party Chair Mike Madigan.
The charges are against Speaker Madigan, so he's the one who's to be held accountable.
Do you think voters recognize that, though?
I'm hopeful that that's the case. It's to be determined, I suppose.
Well, Preckwinkle did not voice concern about Madigan being a drag on Democrats. Republicans are sure to spend the next 3 months trying their darndest.
I'm hearing that they believe crime is out of control under J.B. Pritzker. Taxes and wasteful spending is out of control. Corruption is out of control. And our residents of Illinois want a difference. They want somebody who's actually going to look out for their interests and who's going to get their back.
What makes this so exciting for us is that know that we have a very distinct mission. Pritzker and the Democrat Party have failed Illinois, been serving for 3 years now. People are aware of that. The grassroots movement's alive and well. We've got almost 20,000 signatures to turn in, and we're proud of that, and we think that reflects our movement.
What we need to remember is that Speaker Madigan is the symptom. He is not the cause of corruption in Illinois. We really need a fundamental change in our political system, and it starts really with voters electing candidates and officials that are trustworthy.
Well, the Republican primary for Illinois' governor is among the crowded contests you should see on the ballot this year. But there are a bunch races for Congress, for Secretary of State, and also for Cook County sheriffs. One challenger running for sheriff got teary, talking about the gravity of submitting the election paperwork and what is at stake as her campaign is now really beginning.
This is a human job. This is a position about people. If you lose that empathy, you cannot connect.
That first-time candidate, emotional, excited, but as we noted earlier, some candidates have really been saying that it has been tough to get the required signatures, and that is especially the case often for first-timers who lack money and who lack political organizations, helpers to go door-to-door to get those signatures. Those candidates have another week to get that job done. Petitions are due March 14th. Paris, back to you.
All right, it's a race to the finish line next week. Amanda, thanks very much. And up next, a new book takes an in-depth look at just indicted former House Speaker Michael Madigan. But first, we take a look at the weather. Michael Madigan's arraignment is set for this Wednesday. It comes after the U.S. Attorney last week charged the former Illinois House Speaker with 22 counts, alleging multiple instances of leveraging his powerful position to enrich himself and allies. It's a dramatic capstone to a 50-year-plus career described as both legendary and corrupt, depending on who you talk to. Chicago Tribune investigative reporter Ray Long began covering the State House at the beginning of Madigan's historic reign as Speaker of the House and has unique insight into how Madigan operated. His new book is called The House That Madigan Built, The Record Run of Illinois' Velvet Hammer. And joining us now is Ray Long. Ray, great to see you again. We saw you Friday for Week in Review. Congratulations on the book. And I want to start with the 1981 legislative remap, which kind of launched Madigan's rise to power. He took on then House Speaker George Ryan and won. Explain what happened.
Well, they were both battling. George Ryan was the House Speaker then, the Republican House Speaker. Mike Madigan was the Democratic Minority Leader. And they were trying to get a map through the House that would be something that they could pass to the Senate and get to the governor. And George Ryan was struggling to get a congressional map through. He got that through by a vote or two, and then came the legislative map. And it all came down to one vote, and Ryan had drawn lines so that downstate Democrats would have safe seats, and he was hoping to lure some people over. And a guy named Gary Hannig, who, as you remember, rose up into Madigan's leadership later on, stood up as a young 1 or 2 year lawmaker and said, you know, this is a really good map. And we're sitting in the press box thinking he's going to jump for George Ryan's map. And then he says, but I'm going to stick with who my friends are here. And so he danced with the one who brung him. He stayed with Democrats. Ryan lost that map. And as a result, they went into a commission. They tied in the commission. They drew by lots. And The Democrats won, and by luck of the draw, Mike Madigan was drawing the Democratic map that made him Speaker and launched that 36-year run.
So that battle portended what would come. And then 1988, you're right about the White Sox miracle. Remind us how Mike Madigan worked behind the scenes with Governor Thompson to keep the Sox and owner Jerry Reinsdorf from moving to Florida.
Right. It was an amazing night. The clock was ticking down. The Senate passed the bill with 20 minutes left before midnight. They had to pass it before midnight, or the bill would be dead. Thompson roared across the rotunda. They opened the big wooden doors for him. He jumped in and started wrangling with Republican lawmakers, desk by desk. Madigan scurried to get his list. He went into a darkened speaker's office where one of his daughters was sleeping and found the list and ran out. Steve Brown, his longtime aide, recently was quoted saying, "That was the only time I saw Madigan run," and he ran out onto the floor and he was going desk by desk. Pretty soon they had all the votes they needed except for maybe 2 or 3, and the clock was running down. And then they dismantled the clock so you couldn't tell what time it was actually. And radio broadcaster Charlie McBaron said, I don't know what time they're using right now, but it's got to be close to midnight. Well, they eventually got the final vote. James Stang did it while Thompson was standing on top of him in his desk there, and he pushed the button, and Jim McPike was in the chair, and he slammed the gavel and said, "It's 11:59, boom, the bill passes," and the place was up for grabs.
On a general level, Ray, all observers, myself included, wondered about Madigan, especially in later years, if he had a political ideology or if it was just all about the means. It was all about building power and remaining Speaker of the House, and there really was no ideology beyond that. Is that square with your observation of him?
It looks like that more and more. As I dug in more and more, there were even some interviews, one interview in particular done out of Southern Illinois that I saw where he had said, I don't use a specific adjective that to describe me as a Democrat, like conservative Democrat or liberal Democrat. I'm a Democrat. And as a result, he was able to have more flexibility. And as he moved forward, he went from a guy who was very conservative, coming out of the Irish Catholic enclave on the southwest side, and then he moved to a guy who would support higher taxes for schools and cities, and also gay marriage and abolishing the death penalty and expanding abortion rights. And very much different from a guy who started out as a very conservative guy from the southwest
kind of went
side.
where his party went, and of course we have the political fall capped off by the federal charges he's facing. Here's what U.S. Attorney John Lausch had to say last week.
The indictment accuses Madigan of leading, for nearly a decade, a criminal enterprise whose purpose was to enhance Madigan's political power and financial well-being while also generating income for his political allies and associates. Unfortunately, this type of criminal conduct drastically undermines the public's confidence in our government.
Ray, with patronage and pay-to-play, you have instances in your book where he kind of goes up to that line of legality but doesn't cross it. The conventional wisdom was he always knew where that line was. Are you surprised at what you saw in this indictment?
Well, it certainly is a different Madigan than what was described to us by all of his acolytes and all of his cheerleaders over the year who had said, oh, no, he'll never cross the line. He knows where it is. Well, of course, he drew the lines, too, so he should have known where they were. But he apparently knew when he thought he wouldn't get caught, and this time he did get caught.
All right, well, a lot of interesting anecdotes that give you insight into the man himself and into his historic reign in your book, and our thanks to Ray Long.
Thank you, Paris.
And again, that book is called The House that Madigan Built, The Record Run of Illinois' Velvet Hammer. You can read an excerpt on our website. And we're back in a minute to wrap things up.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabee family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Monday night, abbreviated so we can bring you Chicago on Vacation with Jeffrey Bayer. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing, and you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night, live at 7. Chicago Public Schools goes mask optional starting next week. Chicago Teachers Union leadership responds. And meet a chef honoring his grandmother by creating a Ukrainian-inspired menu to raise funds for the war-torn country. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great evening.